Okay, we're at day 2 of Trek Cross Cup, and very different conditions today. You can see it's really foggy, somewhat mystic, you might say. Uh, but it's also very wet and muddy. It's like a 8:15 or 8:30 race, so I almost slipped out there when I hit that grass, but decent start, decent-ish start. I think it was like what, 6th or 7th here. But I still recognize that I felt like I was in traffic right here, right in the beginning. I was like, man, I'm in traffic. Look at this. I tended to be a little bit further up than this on most of my starts throughout the Wisconsin Cross Series that I ride. So to be even this far back, I was like, oof, with all of this wet and mud, being into traffic early on is not a great idea. So I was sort of nervous at this point, and I was raising all sorts of red flags in my head, like, oh boy, I don't like where I'm at, and I don't like this position. But the other thing about this race is that, you know, I also don't do very well in technical, punchy courses, as we talked about in day one. So here you can see first lap, I'm already like what, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 maybe ish wheel. And so, clearly I have some traffic to put up with. But at the same time, my other weaknesses about remounting, as we talked about in day one, are even worse here in the mud, so that that becomes even more problematic. So here we see again, being in some traffic, there's going to be some difficulty moving through people. So this whole course and day conditions of the course, again remounting here in the mud, did not really play to my strengths. So I think I ended up 22nd of like 91 people. Here you can see I tried to aim for the green is go, green is grass, and I cut this one in pretty well. I think once you have to get into the mud to cut into the turn, I think I did okay on that example. But there's a couple other examples where I didn't do so hot. Again, my technical abilities in some of these technical sections aren't the best. So the mud, I didn't really push it all that hard. Another reason why I didn't push it all too hard is that I ended up being kind of in no man's land for most of this race, and we'll sort of super fast forward through some of these sections of where I'm just sitting out there by myself, running my own tempo. And when I have a wheel to aim to, like I do here, it becomes a little easier, right? Like I can kind of push myself through some of these more technical sections in the mud, kind of really ride the limit of where I can find that limit. This rut had been carved out, so this was getting, it wasn't all too difficult. It's just I felt like being in the middle of nowhere by myself ended up being a lot of a situation where I couldn't push myself as hard as I wanted to. Now this guy, he's raced some Illinois crits and Wisconsin Tour of America's Dairyland crits. I know he's super strong. He was doing pretty well, but I wanted to be out in front of him. We eventually get to the point here where I decide I really want to kind of get ahead of these guys, and I say, goodbye. But then this is where the rest of the race becomes a lot of me by myself in the middle of nowhere. So we're going to do some fast forward cuts here, but I didn't really even have too many people ahead of me to aim for, like at all that I could see. I wasn't paying enough attention, like really far up the race. So I was just kind of riding it my own pace. Here's another example where I try to hit in the grass, green is go, right? But I don't cut in maybe early or I should have there. I don't know. So yeah, I wasn't pushing it maybe as hard as I could have. I wasn't hitting the lines that would have been maybe the fastest. I was taking a safer route. And I think part of this idea of having someone in front of you or having someone with you helps you push to your limits where you can kind of, hit that corner maybe harder than maybe you would by yourself. And here you can see again, yeah, I'm hitting some green, but I cut in too early. So there's another example where when you hit into the mud, I just didn't, I cut in too early there. So I just, I wasn't nailing it like maybe I should have. So I think this is the main takeaway from this race is that when you're stuck in no man's land and you don't have anyone to go with and you don't have anyone to aim for, you kind of end up like riding within yourself a little bit more safer. And you don't kind of push that limit. And so yes, this guy eventually catches me, and I try to, I have his aim wheel to aim for, but eventually he does pull away because some of these technical sections I just simply are not as, you know, skilled at. So, unfortunately, the rest of this race is basically me riding by myself until the end. So, last cut here, I'm just going to show you the lines. I've been nailing these lines on day two. I had what I thought was the best line there. Maybe I could have cut in a little earlier there, but I think I was starting to figure out the lines I wanted to take, whether they were the best or not. I did kind of get to this point where even in this section here, where I thought I had the line I wanted to take, and I was starting to kind of figure out this course, despite it still being wet and technical and difficult, and not necessarily to my strengths. So last little clip here that I want to show is that we're getting into lap riders at the end. And that guy who I was telling you who I was aiming for is up ahead of me. I didn't yell out to this guy that I'm coming up on him early enough. I do eventually say it like right here, which is too late, right? I should have said something back there where I was like, hey, I'm coming up on your right or something. Lap riders, in a 4 or 5 field are going to be common. And it's just respectful just to, yell out to him and tell him you're coming up on him. Totally fine and to be expected, but I just didn't think I did it early enough there. So anyways, back to middle of nowhere by myself, and that's how this race turned out. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think about, pushing yourself to the limit when you're with a group or catching a group, and we'll hang in there for day 3. Thanks for watching.